I would like to introduce myself. My name is Amy Bradford. I'm a client relationship manager with Penn State Extension. So I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the discussion today and serve as your moderator for the panel. We welcome you to the 109th Pennsylvania Farm Show, where you've heard many times that we are celebrating this year how agriculture is powering Pennsylvania. This morning, we are here to discuss how we can work collaboratively to best balance a healthy deer herd while addressing problems that farmers are seeing due to crop damage. Thank you for joining us and taking part in this important discussion. We're first going to hear from our panelists, who I'll introduce individually. After they have all spoken, we'll take questions from the audience. This event is being recorded and streamed live for those who weren't able to join us in person today. So we just keep everybody aware of that. And for those listening online, there is a chat section as part of the online access. So please put your question in that section and we'll ask it to the panel for you. You are not here to listen to me today, so I'm going to get right into the introductions. First, we're going to have the pleasure to hear from Pennsylvania Secretary of Agriculture, Russell Redding.
Amy, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you and welcome to the Farm Show. As Amy noted, we're always proud of this show and this opportunity to talk about agriculture and the many, many issues that, find their way into the conversation. I reflect on every day is unique here. We're with Dr. Temple Grandin downstairs talking about autism and agriculture and human behavior and how animals make us human. I often think about what a great sort of journey that she's been on. But again, to the point that these are the types of issues, whether it's the animal care and concern, it's economics, it's women in agriculture, our veterans will celebrate today. And among the many and varied issues is this concern about the deer hunting / land management / human behavior, animal behavior. I think they're all part of this conversation. And really appreciate the panel we have today, and certainly want to say thank you to the Game Commission, who's been a really wonderful partner in this conversation. And I don't think anybody here will tell you that this is an easy issue. But every place that I go across the state, I hear a pretty consistent message that we've got an overabundance, we've got a density issue, we've got concerns about deer populations, and some of that is result of management decisions. Some of it's a decision about what we do in the legislature does to address that. But I'll also give you a very personal perspective, and that is it's about the individual landowner's obligations and responsibilities to manage the land. And I see it in my own neighborhood that we've got folks who've posted land access, and those deer feed on neighboring lands without access to the land that's posted for purposes of management. And it just compounds the issue that I think the Game Commission and is addressing, but it also then compounds some of those policy pieces. But we're here today to sort of talk about that. I just want to say thanks to the Game Commission and Steve in particular of what he is doing to try to elevate this conversation. We have been engaged for some time about the concerns, how to manage them, what latitude they have. They've done a lot of work at the commission level to try to address some of these issues, and there's more to do, obviously. But I want to say thank you to the Game Commission, and certainly want to say thanks to Chris Hoppin and Farm Bureau, who's been championing the issue publicly, and I think in all of the journey of legislative and policy development. It's been wonderful to see sort of Farm Bureau sort of step into this in a really important sort of pivot point to help sort of bring people in, get perspectives, try to manage the concerns given the varied issues. And then always want to say thanks to Randy Ferguson and the folks in the Hunter Share and the Harvest. We are blessed in the state to have that protein and access to that protein. We've seen the power of that protein in the food bank, and for those who are hungry, it just has made a huge difference. So you put these things together where you've got the farm community and the land management, you take the Game Commission and the policy perspective that they have and the concerns generally, and then you add to that some of the charitable feeding system opportunities. I think we're in a good place. So I want to have that conversation today and certainly welcome feedback and perspective And this is one of those points I'll just end with to say that everybody has a role. Right? There is not a single entity that's off limits here. So from a land standpoint, land manager, and a farm standpoint, we've got an obligation. Legislative, certainly in terms of extending those policies and potentially even funding Game Commission in terms of the management and the stewardship of that. And then from an advocacy standpoint, Farm Bureau, certainly. And then always being mindful, we live in a state where we can address those issues of hunger in part through what we do in Hunters Share in the Harvest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Redding. You did my job for me because you've already introduced everybody at the table. But I will do the order. So next, we have Chris Hoffman, President of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. Chris is a hog and chicken producer from Juniata County. Chris?
Thank you, Amy. And I actually thought this was a pork meeting, so I wore my tie. So I have to shamelessly plug our pig farm every time. So yeah, I got to get a deer tie, according to Secretary Redding. Thank you, Secretary Redding, for opening this. And you know, on behalf of Farm Bureau, we're really excited about the possibilities of the future. I think as you sit and look around, this type of a meeting probably wouldn't have happened a few years ago. In this type of structure, with this type of folks willing to work together to really try to make a difference. And you know, as over the last year or two, we always asked our county farm bureaus to put together like their top 5. What's the top 5 issues that you have in your county? What's important to you? And last year, when all of them were compiled, wildlife damage, wildlife in general became the #1 issue of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. And at that point, we realized that we really have to think about how we address this, how we work with our stakeholders, how do we engage with our legislative body, and how do we try to put some meaningful strategic plans together to be successful. And over this past year, we have had many great conversations, and we've started to see that needle moving in a direction where our individual landowners, our farmers, will have more tools, more access, more ability to be able to control what is happening on their farm. And it really takes that conversation, and we need to try to take the emotion out of it sometimes to really get to the solution of the problem, right? And how do we address it? And we know that there's going to need to have many different tools in our toolbox as we think about how we go about this and how we solve the problems. As we talk about how agriculture is done across this state, we know there's a difference, right? When you farm from Lancaster all the way to Erie, right? It's a different topography. Wildlife is the same thing, right? It is different in what you have to manage. You know, in my area, I don't have to worry about the elk. I would like to have an elk on my land just so I have an opportunity, but you know, different areas have different problems, and so we have to be able to work with our partners to be able to make sure that we can actually solve the problems as we think about what is ahead of us. You know, I get to travel a lot across this state and get to meet a lot of farmers, and I get to listen to their stories, right? And those stories are very powerful. You know, you go out to Fayette and you see a farmer who's been just decimated, completely decimated, looking at filing bankruptcy, years of farm experience, yet unable to do anything to really meaningful make that difference. You go up into Crawford and they can show you yields on their combine on how certain areas are a struggle because you're seeing less crops coming per acre. You know, just heard the other day in some near Philadelphia where some things were done that caused a yield of 170 bushels went to 34 bushels. because of some management tools that were used. So we have a huge job ahead of us as we think about how do we control, how do we give those tools to our farmers to do it. And then on the other side, as Secretary Redding talked about, is, how do we take some of that product from the land and get it into our food banks? How do we think about food security, right? How do we feed people, being able to use these products that are on our land, right? To be able to make sure people don't go hungry and get 3 meals a day. It is really an important issue for us in agriculture and as in our farming communities. And so I'm excited about where we go from here, because I know that we have a whole group of stakeholders committed, from the Game Commission, Hunters Sharing the Harvest, the Secretary of Ag, the department. We've met with sportsmen. They understand our problems. So with all stakeholders together, right, we have the opportunity to change this narrative. We can do this as a Pennsylvania team, right, to be able to really make a difference. And I'm excited, because I think that at the end, we're going to be able to keep farmers farming, and we're going to be able to have hunters hunting, and that is our best management tool. And so I look forward to this conversation and what happens after this, because I think it's too important not to make this come with strategic planning and getting a system together that we can actually solve those issues that are out there. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. Next, we're going to turn it over to Randy. Randy Ferguson is the Executive Director of Hunters Sharing the Harvest.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of Hunters Sharing the Harvest, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with my counterparts up here. I'm glad that we've been invited to be a part of this conversation. For those of you who aren't familiar with Hunters Sharing the Harvest, we're Pennsylvania's venison donation program. We're a nonprofit charitable organization, and the premise behind our mission is providing an opportunity for hunters to donate excess deer beyond what their family needs to feed folks in their community who are suffering from food insecurity. We've been doing this for 31 years now, 33 years now, and it's a model that's been followed around the country over those years. We do a tremendous job here. Pennsylvania hunters last year, and when I say last year, I mean the 2023-24 hunting season that we have records for, donated 262,000 pounds of venison in that one season alone to feed the hungry here in Pennsylvania. So it's a tremendous mission that is really doing good, and it's providing a valuable protein source out there in the charitable food system. Our mission, our program, has been growing like crazy over recent years, and one of the areas that we're noticing the biggest increase is in what we would consider crop damage category of deer harvest. So that's something that we've already started to see based on a lot of the conversation that's been happening already to date. We're starting to see those numbers come up. As a nonprofit charitable organization, our challenge always is, the key to our mission is the fact that we are paying the reimbursement cost for every deer that's donated in this state, so that the hunter doesn't have to have a financial obligation when they want to donate a deer. We consider that donation being the good that that hunter has done. We don't want them to have to pay for it as well. And frankly, the model wouldn't work if we did ask them to do that. So we are always in a fundraising mode. So part of our concern and why we want to be a part of this conversation as we navigate through some of the different hurdles that are going to come up is the fact that for our operation to be able to continue to expand at the scale that it is recently, and we're talking year-over-year growth in the crop damage category of somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%. So it's very significant to us that we, as we try to help be a part of this very important conversation with the ag community in the state, that we can also rely on some support from that community to help us grow, to help us be there to sustain our mission and the kind of growth that we anticipate as we start to solve some of these crop damage issues through the conversations that we're going to be having here. We have tremendous support from the Department of Ag. We've got great support from the Pennsylvania Game Commission. The Farm Bureau has been awesome in getting the communication machine out there over the last year or so. So we're just looking to really engage with the ag community more than we probably ever have in our 33 years. You know, we've always been primarily hunters out in the field during what you would consider the traditional general hunting seasons. Crop damage deer from farms has always been a percentage of that. It's just in these recent years that has really started to grow at a great volume. So we just want to be prepared so that we can continue to be the mechanism for some of these deer to be taken off the landscape and then placed into the charitable food system so we can do a greater good for Pennsylvanians.
Wonderful, thank you, Randy. Everybody's already giving us lots of action items to take away today, right, and how we can be a part of the solution. Last, I'd like to introduce Steve Smith. Steve's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and we appreciate you coming for your presentation and the perspective from the Commission.
Thank you very much, Amy. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to my fellow panelists, and just briefly reiterate the comments that you made that were so on point and exactly what we want to talk about today. And it's been great to continue this dialogue, to have this dialogue, and for Randy and Chris, appreciate the viewpoints that you've brought, and in particular also Secretary Redding. Thank you for being here, and I've appreciated the conversations that we've had, and glad that this is just going to be a continuation of them. So thank you for inviting us here today. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this important issue. I've been asked to go through really quickly the tools that we have, as Chris alluded to. What are the tools that are already in existence? And I think it's important to have that context and have a discussion about what they look like, so that then we can talk about what's working and how can we improve upon it and what the method for doing that would be. So I do want to be mindful of the time and certainly leave the opportunity for some question and answers and get the feedback from you all. But really briefly here, I'll provide an overview of the tools that are already in place, and then again, talk about how they can be improved upon. And of course, this discussion really gets to the heart of what it is that the Game Commission does. We are responsible for managing the Commonwealth's wildlife, which is such a valuable and precious natural resource. We're responsible for managing it on behalf of all Pennsylvanians, both current and future generations. And I will second what's been said earlier, and certainly not an unbiased individual, but nonetheless, as I travel the state, and I'm just hard-pressed to think of too many other states that have the variables that we do at play that when it comes to managing wildlife, be it the size of our state, the diversity with the population areas, the diversity in the topography and geography, and then of course the diversity when it comes to land use, all of which are factors that go into managing wildlife, and all of which are why days like today and what we're doing here are so important, because we can't reach that appropriate balance on our own, but we need the input from all different stakeholders, everybody represented here today, to make sure that we're doing we're fulfilling our responsibilities appropriately. When we talk about the tools that are in place, I think it's important to recognize the different categories, and we have statute and regulation. And when I refer to statute, I'm talking about the Game and Wildlife Code. That is set in law. It requires legislative approval to change, to add to subtract from. And then there's programs set by the Game Commission Board of Commissioners, and these are programs set in regulation by the Commission Board. From a timeliness factor, it's much easier and more efficient to change regulations than it is law. Our board has the ability to make changes within the course of a calendar year, and they can do it in 2 successive meetings. But there's different categories, and it's important to keep that in mind when we talk about the options. For those that are within statute, and we'll get into this a little bit, there's the protection of property, and then underneath that, a depredation permit. Those are within the Game and Wildlife Code. And then within regulations set by our Board of Commissioners, we have the Agricultural Deer Control Program, the Deer Management Assistance Program, and then, of course, regular hunting seasons. And now we'll get into those a little bit. So protection of property, this is set in statute. This allows an individual who's eligible, and I'll define what that is, an individual who is eligible under the law may remove wildlife that is actively destroying crops, fruit trees, vegetables, livestock, poultry, or beehives. And that language is wildlife then that was removed under this section can make it into the food stream and for consumption. An individual who removes a deer for this purpose is allowed to keep one carcass for consumption as long as their land is open to hunting. The question of who is eligible really turns on whether or not the cultivation of crops on that property is a primary means of livelihood. And what this requires, this threshold, is that the individual who owns the property, the landowner there, is using the cultivation for a source of income. And it extends not just to the owner of the land, but anyone who's leasing the land, a member of the family that's actively engaged in cultivating, or the second category there, which is an individual authorized by a permit. And what this allows for, the landowner or owner, leasee, member of the family can take the steps to remove wildlife that's actively destroying crops, or they can request a permit from the Game Commission that would allow the individuals who receive that permit to take the same steps that the landowner, lessee, or family member would. That's a program set under the law. Programs set by the Game Commission Board of Commissioners includes the Agricultural Deer Control Program, or the Ag Tag as we call it. This allows landowners to enlist the help of hunters to harvest antlerless deer. There's a period of time when hunters may participate in this program from August 1st to September 15th, and then again February 1st to April 15th. The goal here is really to structure the program around the time when deer are potentially doing the most damage, be it while the crops are growing or right prior to planting season as well. The exception is during this, for use of this program, is it cannot take place on Sundays because it is an extension of the normal hunting structure. The prohibition in law to hunting on Sundays also applies to this program as well. And an application is available to individuals who want to participate in this program by contacting the Game Commission's regional offices. Now, we've talked about changes, and as I've also traveled the state, as I mentioned, this is probably the comment that I've received the most is we'd like to see some changes to the program. We'd like to see it restructured. We'd like to allow for more individuals to participate. And again, that's the point of being here today, is to hear those comments. We've taken them back, and we've worked with our Board of Commissioners on proposing changes to the program. Probably the most common comment that we receive is making it easier for landowners to apply and to renew to get into this program. Remove the 4 coupon per limit that is currently in place, so that if a landowner has a hunter who's using this program, they can provide them with more permits as they become successful and remove more and more deer. And then also expanding the season dates. And these are all things that our Board of Commissioners has taken into consideration and is ready to move forward with. In fact, our board will be meeting in just about 3 weeks. They'll have their first quarterly meeting of the year, and on their agenda is going to be a proposal to incorporate the changes that we've heard into this program. It'll be preliminarily voted on in January, and if approved by our board, it'll come up for final adoption in April, and then theoretically could be in place by this summer. So we are, again, it shows the ability of our board to move quickly when it comes to passing regulations, to amend regulations, and our board has demonstrated and indicated that they are committed to making improvements to this program so that we can address some of the problems that we've been hearing. Another program is the Deer Management Assistance Program. This allows for additional antlerless deer to be harvested during the regular hunting seasons, and that's probably the biggest distinction between this program and the Ag Tag program. The Ag Tag, there's specific season dates outside of the normal hunting process. Under the Deer Management Assistance, or the DMAP program as we call it, it's more hunting opportunities within the current hunting season structure, and the opportunities is in the form of more tags. So it allows landowners who would like the additional deer taken off their property to receive additional tags that then they can distribute to hunters. Landowners can receive 1 coupon for every 5 acres of cultivated land, or 1 coupon for every 50 acres of land that's not cultivated. And landowners can provide up to 4 coupons per hunter on private land properties that are enrolled in the program. And then, of course, we also have our just normal, regular hunting season structure. And again, our board has been responsive to the questions and comments that we've been receiving about expanding opportunities to deal with a growing deer population, and they've done so through expanding hunting season opportunities in recent years. Some of that has looked like an expanded archery season that goes longer than ever before. Beginning the firearms deer season on a Saturday. Traditionally, that season always began on a Monday. Our board made that change a few years ago to move it to a Saturday to allow for additional people to participate in that season. More antlerless licenses, that number has increased in recent years. Of course, this is even in addition to ag tag and DMAP tags, just more antlerless licenses. And then we've had the ability to implement limited Sunday hunting opportunities. I talked about from the beginning the difference between law and regulation. Hunting on Sundays is a matter within the legislation. It's within the Game and Wildlife Code. So our ability to implement it is dependent upon that law as it has changed. And it was changed a few years ago to allow additional hunting opportunities, and the board has implemented it as such. I'll just end in closing with, as we think about these problems that we currently face, some advice I was given early on is remember, always keep in mind that we're not the first people to think about these problems. Chances are, if we're dealing with a problem, it's something that has come up before. And I think this quote really brings it home, because I think most people would agree that this quote could apply today. In reality, it came from my predecessor almost 80 years ago. So it still is an issue that we are continuing to deal with. And the end to that quote is he turned to, we have the tools to solve this problem, which is the use of our hunters. And again, here we are in 2025 making that statement that we recognize the problem, we recognize the comments we received from stakeholders across the state, and now we're here to talk about solutions and how we can fix that. So I know we've gone through a lot. There's certainly an opportunity to provide more information on our website or through contacting the Game Commission. Certainly welcome anybody to do so. And now I believe I'll turn it back over to you, Amy.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. We appreciate all those specifics and getting us started. I'm sure his information has gotten those questions going in your head. We do at this time want to turn it over to a Q&A session for the panelists. We did have a few questions come in prior to the event so that we could get things started for you. So I'd first, we'll come over here to Andy Bader. Andy is a Center County farmer for a question.
This is an example of Secretary Redding really being on top of things. He already asked my question, so I'll embellish it a little bit. We have a significant problem with lands that are posted. They are possessed by landowners who maybe they don't like hunting, maybe they've had problems with hunters. In some cases, they're private game reserves and things like that. We even have farmers who farm land that the landowner will not allow hunting. The deer are obviously moving back and forth between those different types of land. How do we resolve this issue, which is of increasing challenge here in Pennsylvania?
Well, thank you for that question, and it's a great question. It really gets to the heart of the issue. I think that there's two parts to that, right? There's the posting of private land, and then there's the symptom that comes from the posting of private land. Because essentially, by posting large tracts of private land, it's making the statement that wildlife management isn't going to be taking place there. It's removing the ability of our hunters to be on there and influencing those wildlife populations. Because As we all know, unfortunately, wildlife doesn't respect boundary lines. So while one tract of land might be private and the individual might like to see that population increase, that doesn't mean he can contain it just in that area. Wildlife is moving. So I think that I would begin to think about your question by starting with that. What can we do to influence that private property owner to allow for more hunting to take place, or even just hunting at all? And the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has long recognized, from a policy standpoint, a value in having lands open to hunting, letting wildlife management take place on those lands. That's why decades ago, the Recreational Use of Land and Waters Act was passed, which provides that if an individual opens up their land for recreation, including hunting, that landowner is immune to lawsuits from an individual who claims that they were injured on that property. That demonstrates the extent to which the Commonwealth recognizes the value in opening lands. So as I've been traveling across the state and talking to landowners in that situation, I think that there's a need to do more. And one of the things that I've heard is just landowners not necessarily having a comfort level with opening up land to anybody who knocks on their door and asks to hunt their property. So we have begun to look internally at the Game Commission if there's a program that we can create to address that. And one thing the Game Commission has long done is provide educational opportunities for our hunters. We certify tens of thousands of new hunters each year through an educational program. What I've asked our staff to take a look at is if we can create an enhanced program where we can find hunters who would be interested in harvesting additional deer and helping out landowners, and if we could put them through an enhanced program where we can provide even more safety training to those individuals. And there would also be some eligibility requirements to make sure that these are hunters who have a long track record of doing so and hunting in a very lawful and safe manner. And if we can show that those individuals have met those requirements, have gone through an enhanced program, and then maintain essentially that database of those who've done so, and provide that to landowners who would like to see some additional hunting opportunities take place on their property, but they needed just that comfort level that the individual coming through is somebody who's going to do so in a safe and ethical manner, then maybe that will help close that gap a little bit and allow some more hunting to take place on those private lands. Because really that's the heart of the problem, is managing that wildlife on that private land, because again, doesn't respect those boundaries. It has the ability to cause damage outside of it, and we need to make sure that we can get our hunters on there to address it. And that's where I keep coming back to, is how can we have the solution in the form of hunters. How can we put them in the right places to address the problem?
So listening to Steve, I think it helps me think about this, that ultimately you've got to change the paradigm a little bit, right? If we're always going to be blocked in terms of access, it forces me to think about, well, what are the levers that we would have? Certainly one would be, what benefits do we extend as a Commonwealth to the landowners, such as cleaning green? Now, it's a Pandora's box. I mean, I'm not saying that, right, because all of a sudden you've got access. But if I'm going to extend a benefit to you in terms of reduction of tax and property tax, in exchange for that, maybe one of those areas becomes, with a set of metrics or something, look at the tax policy. What about conservation policies? Where are we in making investments through conservation districts with foresters? Where are you spending money on invasive species? There are things that we invest in that landowner to help them on the value and ultimately the environment. But maybe in exchange for that, we ask for something a little more, where you've got some density or some metrics that lead you to a different outcome.
Yeah, I think that question is kind of something I alluded to in the opening statement, right? So when we have those types of situations, and something that Steve and our team and your team talked about, right, is so what kind of programs above and beyond are we going to be able to put together to bring hunters in to make sure that we can manage it differently, because we know that this is a situation that is kind of different, right? When you have big tracts of land that are a barrier you can't get to, how do we get those deer harvested? How do we bring hunters in? How do we get to that place with probably a program we may not even have right now? and then being able to tie in, hunters sharing a harvest or some way of getting it into a food bank, and how do we find processors, and so I think that it's a complex issue, but I think that it's going to be a lot more pinpointed on these situations and being able to come up with a strategic plan that will address issues kind of in ways that are maybe not addressed today.
Great, thank you. I have Rob Waddell, a farmer from Crawford County.
Can you hear me? Yep. I'm a farmer from northwest Pennsylvania, Crawford County. I milk around 1,000 cows, and we crop 3,500 acres. Before I get to my comments, on the last comment, there is when people have their posted land, and we see that where they come off their posted land and eat our crops. We know at nighttime they come out, and so that's a big issue. But my question for the panel is, how can we move to more prescribed herd management in northwest Pennsylvania? We see a tremendous increase in crop damage due to too many deer negatively impacting our yields by substantial amounts. We currently use the DMAP program to help, but we want to explore more effective solutions. What about expanding harvesting programs like the one used at Presque State Park? They keep the number of deer that the habitat can support and remove the rest. Why not combining the ag tag and the DMAP programs so we can more effectively manage the herd year round? If we could cut some bureaucratic red tape and ensure the harvested deer go to families in need or families that can use them. We have investigated fencing as an option, but it's currently economically not viable. We are looking for solutions that would help farmers retain all the investments they have in their crops. That's the question. I got one more comment at the end here. Sorry. We don't go out and just shoot deer, for crop damage. That's not our goal of our farm. We want them the hunters to have them. We want them to go to needy people. But Penn State, we partnered with Penn State through Farm Bureau, through Andy, with a drone survey of our farm. So currently Penn State is doing a survey on alfalfa fields and soybean fields from June through November, this past November. So we want to collect data and it was sent to the Penn State team for analysis. They're doing the work on a model to be able to better detect deer damage on game cameras. We flew drones, we have game cameras. They're also getting started on this work, hoping to continue funding in the spring semester. Our goal is to get good numbers and dollars tied to the deer damage. So we're working on ways to do that so we can quantify what damage we have. So I'll stop.
Well, I'll just say that, so I know Rob very well, used to sit on our board, and I've actually seen, he brought in the yield monitor from his combine, and being able to show a field and to be able to show where the trails are, right? If you're a hunter, you know how deer get to your farm because they have a pathway, and he was able to show us with using maps where the combine was going and just show how the yield just dropped, right? Knowing that there's quite a bit of damage that's happening there just because of the foresting that they're doing, right? And so, to me, that is something that we really want to get some real good numbers in trying to understand just what is that value, right? We know that it's in the millions of dollars across Pennsylvania as we think about it. That's why this issue is such an important issue to farmers. And so I think that it just continues to, we need to get more data. We need to continue to make sure that we understand the economics that is really occurring to our farms, and then being able to figure out how do we put the programs together to make it really work And I really believe that it's going to be a lot more of programs that are going to be pinpointed in areas that will be kind of as needed as a necessity program.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that a little bit, appreciate your comments. And we've heard that from many farmers across the state, and certainly understand what you're going through. And we want to find the solution, as Chris said, and listed some, the programs that we have, as well as some changes that are on the table being talked about, and fully expect that there'll be additional changes as we get through this. As we continue to develop it year in and year out, we're going to see what worked, what needs to be fixed some more, and continue to grow those programs until we've been addressing the problems that you're having. You talked about getting rid of some of the red tape, streamlining those programs. Should we be combining the programs? Those are all on the table for discussion. And I can tell you that internally within the Game Commission staff, as well as with our Board of Commissioners, we're having those conversations of how can we make sure these programs are effective on the ground. And I think as I look at them, probably the biggest area of opportunity that we have is expanding that ag tag program. And I'm so excited that our board's going to take those steps. But we want to see if it has the result that we think it will. If not, we'll continue to look for ways to make it even better. So thank you for your comments. We're committed to trying to solve this the best that we can. And we can only do that with the kind of feedback that we've been getting from individuals like you. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I do remind people that are listening online, we do have a chat available for that. So if there's anything that would be coming in that way, we did have one come in, Secretary Redding. The department, PDA's position or opinion on Sunday hunting. Is there one or no?
No. I'll leave my personal view out of this, but I think, as a department, we have not taken a position on it. We have watched the dynamics around it. As a landowner and a hunter, there are certain things at a personal level that I appreciate that we're given a day of rest and respect that day. At another level, if it helps get to this problem, to address the problem, then you can accept a little bit of some of that, maybe the inconveniences that go with it. But I certainly, I think that it's something that has, from my view, has unfortunately, I think, has tainted some views about some other extended sort of management opportunities with about this problem that have stood in the way, and I worry a little bit about that being a stumbling block to allowing us to use the full arsenal of tools to address the issue, right? So you present something that helps at one level, and maybe on the other it sort of turns people away from their interest in engaging on it. So that's the concern. That's not a policy position. While I have the microphone, let me ask a question, one to Steve, and this has come up. It's sort of a connection between Hunter Sharing the Harvest and the Game Commission, is that as we have, the Hunter Sharing the Harvest program has grown and interest has grown, we've bumped into some availability of processors that don't completely align when the red tag program is available or the options are available. And it's complicated things, because what do I do even if I harvest the deer, where do I go with it, right? Unless I've got a local butcher shop or somebody who can do the processing. And that's come up numerous times. So just sort of tucking that in, that as a policy piece, or we spent a lot of money through the PA Farm Bill, about $3 million, looking at local meat processing. With a lot of times folks will talk about these opportunities about processing deer for themselves or the community. So just asking that as a consideration as the Board of Commissioners sort of thinks about that issue.
I'm glad you brought that point up, because it was actually one I was going to try and find an opportunity to get into the conversation here. One of the things in my job is that I have the ear, or probably more appropriately, the processors around the state have my ear, because they're talking to me about some of the struggles that they have. It's an industry in general that has suffered from a certain amount of contraction over recent years. It's like a lot of other family-run, generational type of operations typically, where, you know, maybe the younger generation coming through has watched grandpa and dad struggle through making a living as a deer processor or whatever, and maybe they've got other thoughts and so forth. So we've been trying real actively to engage with more young people, entrepreneurs that are out there starting their own processing business. But as part of all these conversations, I'll often hear from people, from our processors, who are wanting to have a voice, and maybe they just haven't found a way to kind of engage in some of these conversations that we're having here. But that's one of the ones that comes up very often, their capacity. Sometimes they really struggle under the load during the various hunting seasons to be able to keep up with the volume of deer that are coming through their processing facility. The other thing that we find is an issue as we look at crop damage, and the fact that some of these programs, ag tag specifically, that kind of fall outside the dates of our traditional hunting seasons, when a lot of these deer processors, who are only deer processors during, you know, basically the end of September through the end of December or January, if they're staying open through flintlock season and archery season, a lot of them go to running their lawn care business or something else from April and May through the summer. So we do have to look at things like this. This is really kind of where we start to get into the weeds, and we're probably not to that point quite yet in the conversation, but it's going to be very important moving forward that the processing industry here in PA is brought into this conversation as well, so they can speak to their capacity and their ability to bring in higher volumes of deer during times of year than when they might not typically be prepared for that. So,
thank you for your comments, Secretary Redding and Randy. And Secretary Redding, I'll credit you for you and I had this discussion several months ago, and you planted the seed in my mind of what can we do in this space as well. And one thing I've asked our staff to look at is if we can't develop a program. Earlier this year, we created a grant program to fund private shooting ranges, where we have clubs that are expanding their ranges, doing infrastructure. They can now apply to the Game Commission for a grant to help supplement some of the cost of that. So I've asked our staff if we can't do a similar program modeled off of that to help our processors as well. If you look at the chain of events that go from an individual having an interest in hunting until that deer ends up, you know, on their dinner table, that last link is a processor. And if it's not there, it breaks that entire chain, and maybe an individual doesn't go out and fill a tag, be it in an ag tag, DMAP, or antlerless. So how can we promote that? How can we make sure that's happening? And I think we have to make sure that last link in the chain is there as well. We've heard from numerous times where hunters have contacted us to say, I don't have a processor to take it, or just processors that we run into who have said that they're at capacity. They had to turn hunters away. That's not going to help sustain the kind of harvest that we need to see and keep hunters engaged in the sport. So very early in the stages of thinking about how we can develop a program. And again, thank you for planting that seed months ago. And I hope it shows that, be it this program, this grant program, that I'm excited that we'll be able to get it off the ground this year, or be it the program for providing more educational opportunities for our hunters to get into private properties, or be it what our board is trying to do with the ag tag program. I hope it shows the extent to which we're thinking about all this, and these discussions help, and we're committed to making the improvements that we need to.
Great.
And I will say, I was hoping I would get the Sunday hunting question, so I'm a little jealous that you got it.
Great. I saw a hand here. We'll move back.
My name is Doug Lapp. I am a Farm Bureau member. I spent a few years as the president of the Chester, Delaware County Farm Bureau. And since 2018, I've also been one of the key people trying to bridge the gap between the agriculture community and the hunting community. Since 2018, I've been helping the Hunters United for Sunday Hunting effort, as well as working within Farm Bureau to bridge the Grand Canyon of a gap that was between agriculture and conservation. This meeting and the meetings that have been happening within the last year would not have been able to happen back in 2018. There was too much of a divide. And with Farm Bureau evolving on this issue, realizing that we need hunters as much as hunters need private land access, has allowed us to get to this point where we're having these conversations. And hopefully this session, we get a great package through the legislature on both the Sunday hunting issue and some of the legislative fixes for the deer problem. Really looking forward to that happening. But thank you all for being here and for being willing to have this conversation. I didn't think I'd get to see this day. My question is to the Game Commission. There are a lot of programs which you've outlined. We're in the southeast, Chester County. We have, I'm going to say about in our area, between 50 and 75% of land is leased. So it's not the farmers who own the land, which makes signing up for the ag tag and the DMAP programs extremely hard because most of our landowners just don't want to be bothered. But most of our landowners allow hunting. So trying to bridge the gap between that has been difficult, especially with the cut up parcels. You have one field that's technically 4 different parcels to go through the process to get that signed into the ag tag program. Obviously, I know it's going to be changed, but the old system, we tried it after looking at the paperwork for a few hours. I just canned it. So my question specifically is, would the Game Commission be willing to look into creating an early season antlerless firearms season, allowing a week or two of firearms antlerless season after Labor Day before archery that would allow us to make progress on our harvest goals while also giving enough time for the deer to go back to the normal fall patterns for the fall archery season? I love hunting the rut. I want to clarify that. But the deer change so much in the winter when gun season comes in, and in the southeast we have the extended firearm seasons for doe. But the deer have all relocated to food sources, and you either see no deer or you're somewhere where you see hundreds. To move a firearm season to that early window would allow hunters to hunt, which is the most effective way to control deer. It's been the North American model. We all know it works. And to allow our landowners who allow hunting, to allow their hunters an earlier crack at doing some antlerless harvest before they fully change their pattern is something that we've seen in the southeast that we think would really help. Maybe piloting it down in the special regs area. But that's something that would help us navigate. It's not a program, it's an actual season. So landowners would be more receptive to it. It would give hunters that earlier window. It's something to take back to your board to look at. I think it'd be really beneficial for at least our region. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And at the end, you identified it would be something for our board to consider, and the timing is perfect, so thank you again for that as they get ready to head into the January meeting. And I think what you identified is the issue that we've realized is when it comes to harvesting deer, time matters, right? You need that opportunity, and we've expanded seasons in the southeast. But if we're not meeting our management goals, then we're going to continue to look at ways that we can, what we can do to get there. We have some very ambitious management goals in the southeast, and because of the deer problem there. So we're going to, I would say again, all options are on the table. Our board is going to be meeting in a couple of weeks. We'll take a look at the season structure, see if we've been able to achieve our harvest goals. And if not, then we'll look at, what are the ways that we can potentially get there. And I can say that the idea of even expanding some of those extended seasons is one that comes up from time to time. So I think you've, outlined a potential good proposal there, and our board is constantly looking at ways that we can achieve those goals using hunters. And thank you for what you've been able to do there in that space. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Jim Lindley. I'm in Washington County, we're about 30 miles south of Pittsburgh, down in the southwestern corner of the state. I love what the gentleman prior to me, I think that's really a lot of what I was going to say was similar to what he's saying. In our area, in the past 2 years, We personally had about 30% of our crops. We do corn and soybeans, and we plant about 700 acres, which is a lot in our area with the terrain and everything we deal with. It takes 20-some farms, different properties to get that acreage. And we had, I'm going to say 30%, that's a modest number, of our land we couldn't even harvest. It was absolutely decimated. I mean, words can't describe until you see it. We have a hard time understanding if other people in different areas in the state really grasp what we're talking about. But we appreciate all the powers that be for putting this together big time. Is so much, so excited that we're actually going to get somewhere, because there's a lot of farmers that are just completely just going out of business in our area. One gentleman, they had to put a bunch of their equipment for sale at auction. It's just really bad. But with that being said, the other thing, the leased farms with us, we own a few of our own farms, but we lease several of them, just handshake agreement leases. But the problem is these people are gracious enough to let us farm their farms, but if you hit them up with hunting or different seasons or anything, they don't really want to get involved. So it's sort of along the lines as he was saying over there. We're all for, we're doing the ag tag program. We're involved with that, and I think it might be helping. It's our second year to do it. But the deer do move. They're not there. When the crops growing, they're just everywhere. I know it's helping. It's just finding that way that we can, we've got to find something, and it needs to be like urgent, like immediate. I don't know if we can, most of us, it about put us out this year financially. We're really in the hole from where we thought we should have been. So with that, my main question is, and then the other thing, there was a lot of hunters that wanted to hunt during doe season, but the doe tags all sold out. So I don't know if the answer is there a way we could maybe raise that amount up even just till we get this problem under control or in our area? It's something like he was saying early season. It's the first I heard that, and I really like that idea. So that's, I guess my question is there something we can do about these just to get the doe tag numbers up, to get things under control? And we don't have time. It's just a burden on us farmers. We just can't manage it. It's hard enough just to get these tickets out for the ag tag program. It's great. I'm not complaining about it because we have to do it. So, okay.
Yeah, I can address that. And we go through a process of setting the allocation for antlerless licenses within each unit every spring. We're starting to do that now as we gather the harvest data, and the seasons, some of those late seasons are about to wrap up in the next week or two. That'll give us the data, and then we analyze that data and determine where to set the allocation and see if we're meeting the management goals. So we're going to be going through that process, and I alluded to earlier that those allocations have been ticking up in recent years. One of the factors that goes into setting allocations is we look at how the deer is doing from a health standpoint. We look at their impact that they're having on forested areas, and then we also look at the impact that they are having with humans, so that we look at the deer-human conflict, as we call it. And that's really trying to determine where the deer herd, what kind of impact it's having at the social level, which again is why it's so important to get the comments that we've received from members of the agricultural community, which is really, it's the message that we've heard loud and clear, that factor is telling us that they would like to see more deer removed from the landscape, which means more tags put in circulation so that they're not selling out. And then the second part of that alludes to, and you talked about it in the comment earlier, then it's not just tags, but it's having time for hunters to get out there and harvest them. So those things kind of work together, and it's something that's being part of our process right now as we look at setting the seasons for the upcoming hunting year.
Thank you very much. We are coming to a close for our hour. Steve, you are going to provide some closing comments, correct? So before we get to that, is there one more question? Yeah. The one, yeah. Ask this real quick, and then I know we're talking about deer today, but we do have someone. They are an Aberdeen grass-fed cattle producer who sells raw A2 grass-fed milk from Jersey, dealing with black vultures. So I know we're here with the Game Commission, but could you just provide some insight for this person? They have lost 2 newborn calves to the vultures, which kill the calves by taking the eyes out and then leaving the calves to die there. So how can we best educate or mitigate that growing problem?
Amy, is that a question from an individual here? Because I could provide, oh, it came through, okay. And
So we can, if we can vocalize it
Yeah,
here,
no,
they can contact the correct place.
great. The only reason I ask is there's an extra layer of complexity when talking about a species that is also managed at the federal level. Through the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, it requires any actions in conjunction with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So there's that extra layer. It's not, we have talked a lot about deer. Deer are managed at the state level under the statute and the regulations, but when we're talking about migratory birds, we also must, again, take steps in conjunction with Fish and Wildlife Service. So just an extra layer of complexity, which is not to say that there's not steps that can be taken, but they have to be done in conjunction with the Fish and Wildlife Service as well.
Thanks for providing that insight. So, Steve, would you like to wrap things up? I know we have more hands. This is obviously a very involved discussion. That's why we're all here today, right? And we could continue discussion very, very thoroughly and completely beyond our hour that we're given today. So we do want to thank, before Steve closes things up, thank everybody for being here. Thank the agriculture and the hunting community for working on this together to discuss the issue. Obviously, this is going to take some time. We appreciate everybody's patience as we solve this issue, but I think we're all proud and happy to hear today that everybody is working together and we have a commitment to work together to bring relief to the ag industry on this. And so I would say, Steve, your contact information is there on the screen. So if there are more questions after the session, please take advantage of that, and I'll let you close.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I'll certainly stick around, and I saw there were a few more hands and try to answer some of the questions. I couldn't help but think as preparing for this day, as a member of the Game Commission, but also as a hunter, I think Secretary Redding alluded to it, we bring with us our personal experiences. And for me, growing up in rural Berks County, some of my first hunting took place on my neighbor's property, and he was a farmer. And he reached out to us and asked if we could help him deal with the groundhog problem that he had. And we jumped at the chance to do so. And on a very simple level, it imprinted on me the connection between hunting and farming and how they can work together. We were providing a service for him. We were removing groundhogs that were damaging his property. And in so doing, he was allowing us on his property, and then it extended from there to hunt other species as well. And again, it showed at a micro level a model that works at a macro level as well. And what we're here to do is try to promote that, make sure that we're managing wildlife appropriately, and that we're putting the tools in the hands of our hunters to address this problem. So thanks everybody again, thanks to our panel, and thank you again, Secretary Redding, for hosting us here this morning.